workshop meeting to order. Deputy City Recorder Raimundo, please call roll.
Counselor Shaw,
Here.
Counselor Singh,
Here.
Counselor Wolf,
Here.
Council President Hu,
Here.
Mayor Lube,
Here.
and Youth Councilor Vogel is absent.
Thank you. If everyone will stand and please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. City Council or city teammates, any non-agenda items this evening?
Mayor, we do have an agenda item to add, and it's a proclamation proclaiming May 2024 as Jewish American Heritage Month, and I know you have the proclamation in front of you. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so we will move on to proclamations. So I will go ahead and get started with Jewish American Heritage Month for the month of May 2024. And it's an annual celebration of Jewish Americans who have helped weave the fabric of American history, culture, and society. The proclamation is available, will be available outside, and I'll post about it to see all the details. It's also available on the city website if you want to see the specifics. The other proclamation is to support the Surgeon General's call to action to address loneliness and isolation through social connection and physical activity. It is something that I learned about at U.S. Conference of Mayors, talking with some individuals there, and came up with, I'm signing on to Move with the Mayor for the month of May. It is a super cool event, and it's a lot of fun to encourage individuals to get out and to connect and to really focus on our physical and mental health and our overall well-being. And I think it's a perfect opportunity, especially here in Tigard, as it is starting to get beautiful and we are all starting to come out of our houses, to hopefully join me in trying to move or do something mindful for 30 minutes a day. It is hard. It is incredibly hard. And I find, and I think many others find, when we get really busy, I am terrible at prioritizing myself. And so I just want to challenge our Tigard community members for the month of May to really find ways to carve out that 30 minutes. I'm lucky I have like a treadmill that I can put under my desk. And so maybe my 30 minutes one day is going to be walking during a meeting, or playing with my kiddo outside, walking my dogs, or maybe going on a walk with your family to just really enjoy the weather and to be mindful. There's lots of apps out there for mindful meditation and different things that we can do, but I think it's really important that we try to take care of our whole bodies. So we are gonna have a focus on that for the month of May, which I'm really excited for. Stay tuned for details as fun videos roll out. We will move on to public comment. If you would like to call in, please do so now to get in the queue. The call-in phone number is 503-966-4101. And there was no public comment received at the April 16th meeting. And there were no public comments received Monday by noon. We did have some for specific different, I think, hearings. I guess, City Manager, are those for specific hearings, or do we know? I know the City Recorder, the Deputy City Recorder.
Yes, for 2 different public hearings.
Okay. I will address those then. And then, is there anyone signed up for public comment in person?
Not at this moment, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Wold, is there any phone callers in the queue or anyone signed up to testify by video today?
Mayor, there are no callers in the queue and no requests for video comment.
Okay. We will move to City Manager Reimer for the City Manager report.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, good evening, Mayor, councilors, members of the community, and my teammates that are here. Just a few updates. Playing off of your theme of Move with the Mayor in May, we had a busy weekend around Tigard last week. We had great weather and a lot of events. So I just want to start by saying kudos and thanks to many teammates for their efforts. Maddie with our police department, Caitlin with Parks and Recreation, Nicole with city management, Alex with city management, and many others for their work this weekend as well. We had the shred event here, right at this place, and we had about 380 cars, is what I understand. It was jam-packed on Hall. This whole area, the traffic was immense, but we had a great turnout for our shred event. Healthy Kids Day at Universal Plaza, exactly why we built a park like that. Was well attended by our community members, many partner agencies and organizations with the whole theme of the kids and climate being healthy. And so that was great to see. Our volunteer appreciation event, which a few of you were at, thank you for being there, was held at the library to recognize the library as well as many volunteers within our organization. A really great turnout for that. And if you're out and about in the parks, you saw youth athletics at full steam, and the new Cook Family Park playground was as popular as ever with, I have no idea how many kids were there, but there was many, many families there. Just a little more about the cleanup. The other one that we talked about or had as well was our cleanup that Alex helped lead. And we ended up collecting 10 bags of trash downtown in the Main Street commercial corridor. And once again, thanks to Alex and many volunteers for coming out and helping clean up and apply some paint in some areas in the private areas. It sounded like there was no graffiti in our public areas, is what I heard from Nicole.
A little bit on the viaduct, but we focused on the
Okay. So it sounds like there's a little on the viaduct, but that's a great sign of even our system starting to work, and Officer Orth and others that are trying to respond, just so we don't have graffiti in our downtown and other parts of our community remaining for a long period of time. Our Tiger Tyler, or T2 as we know, is in full steam still. We are a big focus, our customer experience team, and so those are teammates from throughout the organization really working on how our community is going to benefit. And it's importantly be informed of the changes coming. So if you are here and live in Tigard, our utility billing system will be changing with that. It'll be great improvements, we believe, for the community as well as us. And so there's a lot of effort going into the planning of it internally and the communication planning that will be widespread moving into the coming months as we look at the utility billing changeover later this year. Our streets team last Thursday got up bright and early to try to get ahead of the traffic and start filling some potholes. Especially the cold weather we have. Obviously the ice and cooling back a few months ago really does some damage to our roads. So we were able to get out and filled many potholes along Durham Road near 72nd, and then we also did some paving on 95th Avenue, just try to catch up on some of the things that are happening to our roads. Continue with our Public Works team. One of the great things, as you know, many departments try to be active with our community in different ways. Our Public Works team has been really active with our local school district, and so last Thursday we hosted 120 8th graders on Thursday and Friday, and so we had teammates from all different parts of our Public Works department talking with the children that were there, giving them tours or demonstration of the type of work that they do, and just trying to understand some of the work that our public teammates are doing in the maintenance area. And then the last thing, focus on our library once again, is we have the Tigard Library of Things that many people may know about where you can check things out. And this includes a metal detector, so I'm not sure if you're aware of, you can even check out a metal detector at our library. And one was checked out by one of the regular patrons, checked out the metal detector to use it to look for shot puts that you use in track and field that get buried in the sand at the track where she coaches. And so it's kind of unique use. She came in the next day and said her son had been checking out the detector in their backyard, and he found her husband's wedding ring in the chicken coop. So hope you'll appreciate that. He had lost it months ago, and they had given up looking. So another benefit of all the things that happen in this community and this organization. And that concludes my comments tonight.
I love hearing stories about the Library of Things and the different ways you can use all of those things. Does anyone have any questions for the city manager? No? Okay, we will move on to the 2024 If I Were Mayor Student Contest Prizes, and we have Management Analyst Richardson here to introduce the item. Welcome, Alex.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. I'm Alex Richardson. You all know me, Management Analyst in the City Manager's Office. This year I helped run the If I Were Mayor contest. So it's a program, as you all know, of the Oregon Mayors Association, and so we have our local contest each year. I did a lot of outreach this year, and we had more entries than we've had before, from what I can tell, which is super exciting. We had 22 total entries, and of those, Mayor Lube has selected the 2 winners. They are here tonight. We have Isabel Huffman, who is awarded the prize for the grades 4 through 5 poster category, and Braithless Stott, who wins for the grades 6 to 8 essay category. And so we're just really excited for them, and we sent their names to the Oregon Mayors Association, where they'll be doing statewide judging. So I'd really like to congratulate them for their wonderful entries, for their poster and essay. And then, yeah, if they'd like to have a chance to say anything, I can invite them up now.
Sure. I think, Isabel, do you want to go ahead and take care of your pictures? I can present everything to you. Come on up.
And you can hold that up if you'd like and show everybody.
So this is my poster that this is the poster that I made for If I Were Mayor contest.
It's beautiful. Thank you very much. I'll let you go and get congratulated by Mayor Lube.
You're welcome. Your parents will want pictures. Do you want to hold the poster? Hold the poster up.
No, perfect. Thank you very much.
All right, great job. And now we can have Braith come up if you'd like to. And I'll offer you the microphone as well.
I'd just like to say thank you for this opportunity, and yeah, thank you.
Thanks for your entry. All right, and we look forward to the contest again next year. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex. The next item on our agenda is the Economic Opportunities Analysis adoption, and I will open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to testify by phone may do so by calling 503-966-4101. And if you'd like to testify in person, there is a sign-up sheet at the front of the room. And we have Associate Planner Pollard here to present the staff report. Welcome.
Okay, I'm still recovering from how adorable that was. Mine is not as fun, but okay. Well, good evening, Mayor Lube and city councilors. I actually am pretty excited to be here tonight. This is the culmination of nearly 4 years of work between 2 projects, so very exciting night for staff. So we do have this in the form of 4 different public hearings, and they do have to procedurally go in this order just because one allows for the next. So I'm going to do a couple of housekeeping items, and then we'll get to the MADE code, the Made in Washington Square code, which are like the stars of the night. But I'm going to start with our economic opportunities analysis. So as you guys know, in 2020, 2021, we kicked off 2 different projects. One was Tigard MADE, and one was the Washington Square Regional Center project update. So MADE investigated the needs of our industrial, commercial, and mixed-use zones citywide, and the Washington Square focused on the Washington Square Regional Center Plan District. So yeah, I'm going to start off with the EOA. We're on the next slide already. So the EOA is a research and employment forecasting document that the state requires cities to update periodically as market conditions change. And sorry, I'm getting used to this. I can sit further back now and this, okay. Thank you. Sorry, that was throwing me off. So we're required to periodically update this economic opportunities analysis, or EOA, as market conditions change or whenever legislative amendments are proposed. So in 2020, I was actually hired to get this analysis going for 2 reasons. One was that the market was rapidly changing, And especially as what we thought we were in the time of the wake of COVID, we were looking forward to a lot of change there. And we had also been hearing from the development community for a really long time that our development code just needed some work for modern development and modern businesses. So we knew we were gonna have to make some updates, which you'll see later tonight. So we had to do this economic opportunities analysis. And second, we knew we were running out of developable employment land in the city, so we needed to take a look at that. So what does the EOA do? It forecasts employment growth and the amount of land necessary to accommodate that growth, and then it recommends policies. So next slide, please. So the EOA was completed in 2022, and in the course of its research, we discovered that the city was even more land constrained than we'd maybe anticipated. While employment growth was expected to require up to 1,100 acres of land, we only had 230 acres vacant, partially vacant, or redevelopable. And even many of these acres are scattered among small parcels that aren't really developable, so it's the true developable land is even smaller than 230 acres. So we've come to the Planning Commission and City Council a number of times now. You guys are probably sick of hearing me talk about this, but we've come with questions about how we should handle the shortfall. So you may remember we had 3 options. One was to continue as normal, acknowledging that land demand will eventually exceed supply. 2 was apply for a UGB expansion, although we've already done that for River Terrace 2.0, and that's spoken for. Or 3, pursue innovative land use regulations that can accommodate a greater density of jobs than what we currently do. So of course, through many conversations with you all and with the community, we decided on option 3, and we've been working on some innovative land use regulations over the past few years. Next slide, please. So using feedback from the Planning Commission, City Council, and development community, brokers, bankers, builders, business owners, and property owners from Tigard and the region, city staff worked with our consultant team to develop policy recommendations. Those policies are highlighted on this slide and reflected in the attachments tonight. Since 2022, we've been working with the community to refine these policy recommendations and turn those recommendations into code, which again, you'll see later tonight. Our goal was to adopt the EOA and the new code at the same time, so that's why even though we really finished this work in 2022, you're seeing it for adoption officially tonight. The motion that we are or the action that we're asking you guys to take tonight is that we'll officially adopt the EOA as an appendix of our comprehensive plan, giving it the final blessing as a policy guiding document and documentation of the city's projected job growth. And we'll also adopt amendments to the comprehensive plan that establish new Goal 9 policies. Next slide, please. The packet also includes a proposal to update the comprehensive plan map. So our existing comp plan map seen here, you can't see a lot of detail because it's very fuzzy looking, because actually our existing comp plan map looks almost identical to our zoning map, which is not really the intent of a comp plan map. The comp plan map is actually intended to set more general policies, while the zoning code and zoning map are intended to get into that finer level of detail. So with the proposed EOA, and I believe it's on the next slide, please. Yes. With the proposed EOA, we propose consolidating a number of comp plan designations on the map. Instead of having a great number of commercial, mixed use, and industrial designations, we've simplified so that we just have one commercial, one mixed use, and one industrial designation, with the downtown and Triangle still identified separately on there because those are separate plan districts with separate policies and things that are happening there. So the way that we've done this allows for greater flexibility with zoning changes that we will make in the future, so we won't have to come back and amend the comp plan every time we do a zoning change in the future. And zoning changes will be more easily able to identify whether they're compatible with that comp plan designation. Next slide, please. So this brings us to our recommendation. Staff recommends that the City Council, or not staff recommends, sorry, the Planning Commission recommended adoption of the economic opportunities analysis and the associated comp plan amendments and comp plan map amendments. Next slide. This concludes our presentation. We're available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. For public testimony, we had one written comment from Dana Krozik. I apologize, you were here. I probably butchered your last name. You can correct me later. And it was from Pacific Realty Associates, PAC Trust, in support of the city's EOA. Mr. Wold, are there any phone callers in the queue or anyone wishing to testify by video this evening?
Mayor, there are no callers in the queue and no requests for a video comment.
Okay. Do you have any response to the testimony for the support of the EOA?
We've worked pretty closely with a lot of property owners and PAC Trust in particular, so we're glad to have their support.
Okay. So I guess, are there council questions? And this is for questions. Yeah, Council President Hu.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Hope, for the presentation. And we exchanged some email about this one already, and I just want to dive this into a little bit deeper. For Goal 9.1 Policy 7, I think I expressed concern about insertion of land suitable for industrial development. Just to give everybody context, that policy states that the city shall limit the development of rental and services, land use, and other industries with lower job density in metro designated industrial areas and land use suitable for industrial development, especially on lot of 10 or more acres, to preserve the potential of these lands for industrial use. My concern is just the insertion of the language of "and land suitable for industrial development," because I was thinking, if a land is already suitable for industrial development, why don't we just designate it as an industrial zone? Why is there a need for this new additional language? I just don't know the intent behind this language. Is it just give you, I hope it's not to give staff discretion to deny retail and service land use in non-industrial zone. So if you could address that question, I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And actually, if we could, Victor, if you could help me bring up the presentation, one of the map slides. I think it would be helpful to look at that for a second. And look at the second map slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, thank you for that question. So this is kind of a two-part answer. One is, as I mentioned in the presentation, the comp plan is really meant to be like an overall like zoomed out version of things. So we wanted to identify land that might be suitable for some level of industrial activity. So all this number 7 does is say that if we have said it's suitable for industrial development, that's a clue for us then when we go and write those zoning regulations that the industrial zones should fall somewhere within what's shaded gray on this map here. But it's not all industrial zoning. We've gone in with a finer tooth comb with the actual zoning code and said, okay, of the areas that are comp plan designated gray here, some of it is going to be mixed use employment or MUE, and some of it is going to be industrial. And that's based off of which land is actually most suitable for like redevelopment and large scale industrial development. Those areas will be zoned industrial. And other areas that are designated industrial here but aren't really suitable for that level of industrial development are mixed use employment. And that's us recognizing that there's a lot of areas that are smaller parcels where existing small scale industrial activity is happening, and we want to continue to see that happening, but we don't necessarily see a lot of redevelopment. And we also want to make sure that those industrial users are allowed to continue to remain even as other uses might come into those areas.
Thank you. And I have one more question about the, let's see, another section where the language from home-based businesses, changed to home occupations. And the new language now, the old language was the city shall allow opportunities for home-based businesses that are compatible with existing and planned residential living environment. And that was changed to the city shall ensure that home occupations are allowed, encouraged, supported, and compatible with residential living environment. So just skipping forward to the Tiger Mako, I understand the definition the term home occupation is defined in the Tiger May Code. But I'm just wondering the use of the word home occupation here, because that just doesn't sound like an ordinary meaning like home-based business to me. So why was the term home-based business changed to home occupation?
Thank you. That was for consistency with our development code. It's home occupation is a term we use throughout our development code, while home-based business is not. So since this is a planning document that's meant to guide planning decisions, we chose consistency with the development code.
Thank you. So it's a term of art that you decide to use. Okay. All right. Thank you. I have no more questions.
Councillor Shaw?
Thank you, Associate Planner Pollard. And I had the same question Council President Hu had. So I assume that home occupations is defined. So if someone is curious what that term is, it's defined in the document somewhere. Thank
Yes.
you. I saw you nodding your head, so I assumed that was yes. And then a question I had is, within that same map, originally the area that was on Durham that included the area that includes, I don't know if you call it south or east, but, and then also north, that includes both the Safeway kind of shopping area and then below the Petco and the Trader Joe's shopping area, that originally had been zoned as industrial, and just confirming that that area is now commercial and no longer industrial.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to picture near a Safeway on Durham.
So it's Durham, between Durham and Royalty Parkway, and then south of Durham. It's hard to see on that map.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
So in between King City and Tigard off of 99.
Okay. I don't recall that being industrial previously. Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Agnes Lindor. So that area is going to remain commercial. It's currently in the red. It's the basically the southernmost red spot where there's a Safeway, and if you go down further, it used to be an Albertsons, but now it's the new Trader Joe's. So that's remaining commercial.
Great, thank you. My concern initially had been there's quite a few senior citizens who live in that area, so I just wanted to make sure that it had been changed from industrial to commercial.
Oh, I see. In previous versions of like briefings, we'd talked about doing, correct. The zoning, as you'll see later, will continue to be commercial. At one point, we anticipated maybe an MUE, but yeah, thank you.
Any additional questions or motion? I know it feels like sorry. We will close the public hearing. Whew. And now council consideration. So, Council President Hu, you look ready to go.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Overall, I really appreciate the update and the economic report. I will support it, but I just wanted to bring out one point for discussion among the council. So under goal number 9, economic development, the document lay out nicely that one of our city's advantages is the relatively high educational attainment level of its citizens and its proximity to the high-tech technology center in Washington County and major educational institutions such as Portland State University and Portland Community College. And the next sentence, it says, Tiger residents envision a future economy that builds on this strength, and then this is new, and encourages more economic mobility for those with lower educational attainment levels. So my inclination is to modify that focus on with lower educational attainment levels, and just change it to more inclusive language, saying that we encourage more economic ability for individual with all educational attainment levels. I just want to pick your brains to see if you prefer that, because Hope did mention that this language was selected specifically by a consultant with purpose. But on the other hand, I think I would like to see that language to be more inclusive. So,
Hope, would you be able to address why that language was chosen?
Yeah, it's for consistency with language throughout the EOA itself. So the language that Councilor Hu is talking about is in the actual comp plan policy language. And we chose that language to be consistent with language throughout the actual EOA document. Whenever it's referencing data about educational attainment levels and how that corresponds with different types of jobs that are available, they use the phrase educational attainment. So it's just for consistency.
Did it say lower educational attainment? No, it just say
I don't believe so.
yeah. So
Educational
so my proposed change could be consistent. All educational attainment. I don't know. It's up. I'm okay either way. So.
Councillor Shaw?
Yeah, I appreciate Council President Hu you raising that, because that was a flag to me. And I believe if we're looking at being supportive of all educational backgrounds, that removing lower ensures that those individuals don't feel targeted, or so it is end up more equitable. So I would support your proposal.
I'm trying to remember. I believe over the many conversations we've had over the years, and I think even on one of the tours, it was specifically addressing some of the encouragement is for us to have businesses where individuals with lower levels of income can start and build careers, and that was a specific intent. And so I don't think that it was meant to be exclusive in any sort of way, but specifically stating we want to be a place where anyone can come and build their career and build their experience and their personal wealth by growing in a business that focuses, because I think some of the businesses we talked to, you specifically addressed, there are individuals who started here who are now in management, and they're, did I throw something?
Flew.
I have no idea what that was. I apologize. That was an intent to encourage and show that that is a focus, that you can have economic mobility by living and working in Tigard. So I just want to say I don't think it was intended to be exclusionary. I think it was intended to be specific, to call it out that we are focusing on that area to make sure that not just the high earners do well in Tigard, but everybody can do well in Tigard. Does that make sense? And correct me if I'm wrong, Hope.
No, that's absolutely correct.
But this is not about, my reading is that this is not about earning, it's about educational level. So I don't know, something just rubbed me the wrong way with the language. I don't know, I can't put my fingers on it. So.
Yeah, and I totally understand that. I think, I don't know that it was intended that way, but again, I think it was acknowledging that those with lower education levels start out in lower paying jobs and maybe don't acquire this, or need to acquire the skills through working in businesses that have career paths. And that was the intent, rather than being disparaging in any sort of way, but I think more being factual about economic circumstances. Whether we like them, or I think it's just an accurate sort of statement of saying, you can come and you can work in some of our manufacturing jobs and get the skill sets to increase your economic mobility, even though you may not have higher levels of education. That's my read of it. Councilor Wolf?
Yeah, I think this sounds silly, but I looked up the word attain, and I think that's the sticking point, because it talks about what you achieve. So I think someone might have a lower level high school diploma, but it doesn't mean that individual couldn't attain an associate, bachelor's, or master's PhD. So I think if it's a little off-putting, it's well, they could achieve what they have an opportunity to do. And so I really appreciate Council President Hu's just reflection of that, but I also think it was more of that intent of the where people are with the degree, the education that they have in place. So I'll be honest, I'm indifferent. I want to support the city on what makes sense for the plan and its specific target to support those at all educational levels. So that's clear as mud from me. But I don't have it. I really appreciated Council President Hu you calling that out. But and I understand it because it is a little off-putting. But I also think if it was a specific target, then I'm fine leaving the language as is. So I guess I'll support direction of the majority of the council. So.
Do you have a reference of exactly where it is? I would just like to read it, like for myself, a page number.
I put on page number 11.
Okay.
It's not numbered, but
It's not numbered, yeah.
But if you go to page, wait, no. Page 3, sorry, page 3.
Also, why I'm looking, would anyone, Councillor Shaw or Councillor Singh?
No, I think unfortunately we denote things as being lower is bad, higher is being good, and you could have lower education attainment level and still do extremely well. That's why I think if we said varying, it's less off-putting, but that would be my recommendation following Council President Hu's comments.
I think my concern is what Mayor Liu pointed out, the word disparaging. I just don't want this to mean as a patronizing or disparaging to any group. And if that's not the intent, I'm fine with the language, but
words also matter. So if the read of it doesn't truly reflect the intent, then we need to think about the words, right? Councillor Singh?
Yeah, just wondering, just the audience for this plan, like, is a high school person going to read this, or a person with an associate's degree read it and get offended? I mean, I'm just wondering, like, is it really practical and to go back and sort of change the language? But I'm indifferent.
Councillor Wolf?
Councillor Shaw just used the word varying, and I actually like that better than all, because I just feel like it represents various levels of education versus always that all is just this big bucket that we sometimes use. But so I hope my question to you is how big of a deal, I mean, what's clearly you brought forward language, you used a consultant to do that. Just curious what your thinking is, to be honest.
To me, I think it mostly just comes down to procedural things, and I would defer to Shelby on like how difficult it is to change that language, because the intent was definitely as Mayor Liu described, but I completely understand where you all are coming from with the feedback, and I'm not married to it. I just am more thinking about the procedural thing and weighing that.
City Attorney Rahala, could you help?
Yeah, so Council, you could totally direct staff to make this change, and I would actually point it back to Hope to say what that looks like in terms of the process. But absolutely, if that's a direction that Council wants to make, we could accommodate that.
so Shelby, would I just make a motion to amend Exhibit C with a specific language?
So I would suggest adopt Exhibit C with this proposed amendment, or Council could vote on the amendment separately and then the main motion.
Okay, I will try. All right, so Mayor, I move to approve ordinance number 24-03 with amendment to Exhibit C, Comprehensive Plan Text Amendment, page number 3, goal 9. I will change Tiger residents envision a future economy that builds on these strengths and encourages more economic mobility for those with lower educational attainment levels. 2, encourage more economic mobility for those with varying educational backgrounds.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? City Recorder, can you please read the number and title of the ordinance?
Ordinance number 24-03, an ordinance amending the comprehensive plan text and map of the City of Tigard for the purpose of adopting the 2022 Economic Opportunities Analysis and associated policies, CPA 2024-00002, and CPA 2024-00004.
Thank you. Will the city recorder please conduct a roll call vote?
Council President Hu,
Yes.
Mayor Lube,
Yes.
Councilor Shaw,
Yes.
Councilor Singh,
Yes.
and Councilor Wolf.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ordinance number 24-03 is adopted by unanimous vote of the council. We will move on to the Washington Square Regional 2040 Regional Center Boundary Amendments, and I will open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to testify by video or phone, please do so now to get in the queue. The phone number is 503-966-4101. And Associate Planner Pollard, all yours.
Okay, good evening once again. Before the final event, we have a bit of a housekeeping item, the adoption of a new boundary for the Washington Square 2040 Regional Center boundary. You saw something like this very recently for the downtown/triangle town center boundary in January, so this should be almost identical, just a different area. Next slide, please. As a reminder, the 2040 Center is a planning boundary created by Metro in 1995. This is a critical part of the 2040 growth concept built around the system of centers connected by corridors. Next slide, please. So you can't really see a lot of detail on this map. There's a lot going on, but the idea that I'm trying to show you is that these are a system of centers that are connected throughout the region, hubs of activity connected by multimodal transportation. Next slide, please. So this is that same map, but zoomed in on Tigard. You can see that Washington Square is identified there in purple, and our other center, we have Downtown Triangle Center in a slightly different shade of purple. It's important to note that Progress Ridge is also a center, but it's not in Tigard, and King City has a center that goes into Tigard, but is managed by King City. Next slide, please. The intent of the 2040 centers was originally primarily to direct growth to specific areas. Under the 2040 plan, as a region, we should be directing growth and density here, and these are areas that are intended to be mixed use. The 2040 plan is basically Metro's comprehensive plan, and it just helps guide their urban growth, UGMFP, Urban Growth Management Functional Plan. There's no requirement that we adopt these centers originally, but Metro incentivized adoption by tying them to 2040 grants. So you would have to adopt the boundary to get the grant, and then we would be subject to certain requirements under the UGMFP. Next slide, please. Now with the new CFEC rules, those are climate-friendly and equitable communities rules, these centers take on a renewed importance. They're designated as climate-friendly areas and utilize a different type of transportation analysis when compared with areas outside of a center boundary. Land use decisions, such as the code package we are going to be proposing later tonight, would normally require pretty intensive transportation review, but as a CFA, the regional center is exempt. Next slide, please. To make the application of these new rules cleaner and clearer, we propose to change the Washington Square boundary to align with the plan district boundary. Next slide, please. This map shows the proposed changes. Changes allow us to align the boundary with the plan district, reduce traffic analysis, and formally adopt to comply with state law. Please note we will not be changing any part of the boundary that's located within Beaverton, although we are changing parts of the boundary that are located within our urban services boundary within the county. Next slide, please. Planning Commission recommends adoption of the revised 2040 Regional Center boundary for Washington Square. Next slide. This completes my presentation. We're here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We did not receive any written comments on this agenda item. Mr. Wold, are there any callers in the queue or anyone signed up by video?
Mayor, there are no callers in the queue and no requests for video calls.
Thank you. Deputy City Recorder Raymundo, has anyone signed up to testify in person?
Not at this moment, Mayor.
Okay. City Council, do you have any questions specifically for this agenda item in this public hearing? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and council consideration of ordinance 24-04. Any questions or comments regarding the boundary change? Or a motion? Oh, question? Yeah, Councilor Wolf?
No, just because I think I can do a comment and then right into the motion. Just appreciate the follow-up on Beaverton and just answering those questions. I was curious about the boundaries. So with that, I move to approve ordinance number 24-04.
Is there a second?
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Yeah, Councilor Shaw?
Sorry, the motion came faster than I could ask the question. When determining the level of transportation analysis, can you give an example of what would change in that boundary area?
In terms of the level of transportation analysis,
Welcome,
going to bring
Mr.
up our
Warren.
CFEC, our CFEC expert over here.
Good evening, Mayor Lube and City Councilors. My name is Skylar Warren, Senior Planner in the Department of Community Development. So, Councilor Shaw, the answer to the question is normally with any area where you're doing upzoning, so you're increasing the number of residences or increasing job density, essentially increasing the number of trips that would be generated, you have to do an analysis that looks at the impacts on state facilities. Under the CFEC rules for climate-friendly areas within these adopted centers, you're essentially absolved of doing that higher level of actual analysis. And what you do instead is prepare a memo that just summarizes what are some generic potential impacts to state facilities in the vicinity. So that memo, in terms of its the work required to produce it, is far lower than it would be if you were doing a full, what's called a TPR analysis under the transportation planning rule. So it's a pretty significant change, and it also helps development as well, because subsequent development that comes in that would be subject normally to those transportation impact analyses, they're exempt from it within the adopted center boundary as well.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to make sure that those who are watching understood what that was, as it was aligned. Just determine the level of transportation analysis. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much for coming up and providing that definition.
Gladly.
Any additional discussion? Seeing none, will the Deputy City Recorder read the number and title of the ordinance?
Ordinance number 24-04, an ordinance to amend the Washington Square Regional Center boundary and adopt the boundary as part of the Comprehensive Plan Map CPA 2024-00003.
Will the Deputy City Recorder please conduct a roll call vote?
Council President Hu?
Yes.
Mayor Lube?
Yes.
Councilor Shaw?
Yes.
Councilor Singh?
Yes.
And Councilor Wolf?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ordinance number 24-04 is adopted by unanimous vote of the council. We will move on to Tigard Made, maintain, advance, and diversify employment. And I will open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to testify by phone or video, please do so now to get in the queue. The phone number is 503-966-4101. And anyone who wishes to testify in person, there is a sign-up sheet at the back of the room if you haven't already signed up. Associate Planner Pollard, welcome.
Thank you. All right, for the almost final item of the night, this hearing is to consider adoption of the new development code and zoning map amendments associated with Tigard Made and Washington Square. As I mentioned, this is the culmination of nearly 4 years of work and coordinating with business owners, property owners, planning commission, council, community members, developers, brokers, bankers, and our own planning staff. And we've ended up here with a groundswell of support, to be honest. We've got folks testifying in support at the Planning Commission hearing, and you guys have received some letters as well, and the unanimous recommendation of approval from Planning Commission. So we are very excited to be here tonight. To recap, the proposed amendments are the result of two projects, Tigard Made and Washington Square. So I won't get too in the weeds with the presentation and the details because you've heard these details on these projects a number of times now, but I will lay out once more the guiding principles for them and some of the engagement that we did to get here. So we'd heard from the community when we started these projects that businesses were having a really hard time finding a place to locate in Tigard. They were having difficulty expanding. Residential and mixed-use projects were difficult to pencil out outside of the triangle, and people wanted to have access to more entertainment and food options in Tigard. We'd heard from the council also a desire for regulations and development that were more focused on climate resilience, mixed-use development, economic diversity, and protecting existing businesses. And now in 2024, we believe we've written regulations that respond to all of these items. So I will take us back to the briefest of moments to the Tigard Made project and what it means. Next slide, please. Tigard Made stands for Maintain, Advance, and Diversify Employment. When we started this project in 2020, we recognized the need of our code to become more flexible to accommodate shifting trends. Our code was made for a different time, when the focus was on keeping heavy, dirty industrial uses away from residential uses. But times have changed. So now industrial uses function a lot differently, and we have different priorities. We were getting a lot of feedback at the time that our standards were not making sense for a lot of new businesses. Industrial and mixed-use projects were having a hard time figuring out where they could go, particularly in our IP or industrial park zone, which we call the industrial zone that doesn't really allow industrial activity. So it was very confusing for people. And of course, the MADE project also became about the results of the EOA that we talked about earlier this evening. It was a response to our city's land constraint. So over the past few years, we've worked with the community, the commission, and the council to design new regulations that focus on what staff has begun to refer to as the three legs of the MADE policy stool. So these three legs are distilled from the policies we adopted in the first hearing tonight. And those three legs are job density and economic equity, environmental sustainability and climate resilience, and connectivity and community. Council has given us also the directive to pursue these policies while continuing to protect existing businesses. And of course, unifying all of these themes is also a desire for simplicity and flexibility so that our code can adapt to unpredictable market changes without getting in the way of good development. So MADE conducted several rounds of outreach throughout the past few years, including surveys, town hall meetings, individual interviews with business owners, developers, and experts, events with Adelante Mujeres, the Tigard Chamber of Commerce, and the Oregon Association of Minority Entrepreneurs. And we had meetings at various locations throughout the city. About 150 community members responded to a survey, about 100 attended an event hosted by a partner organization, and about 75 attended a town hall or similar event. We also conducted interviews with 50 business owners, developers, and planning experts, and worked in depth with some more involved business and property owners throughout this project. Throughout the process, we worked really closely with the community to bring city goals, community needs, and market realities closer into alignment. Community members have now had several rounds of regulations that they reviewed and provided feedback on. The regulations you see tonight are the result of long and careful engagement process that has allowed for an iterative code writing experience. Next slide, please. Meanwhile, we have the Washington Square Regional Center Update Project, which began in recognition that the previous plan for the area, which was adopted in 1999 and envisioned the plan as a dense, walkable, vibrant place, had not yet come to fruition the way it was intended. One of the main things was that we were not seeing the density we expected there, primarily because our regulations allowed more density and height than the market actually wanted to build there. The Update project saw the potential for this area and took a new approach that better aligned with market realities and was updated to reflect new community needs and aspirations. The Update project ended in 2021 with the adoption of new comprehensive plan policies focused on coordinated land use and transportation frameworks, equitable public investment, active transportation, recreational opportunities, housing development, business development, and coordination with regional partners. These policies have yet to be codified, which is why we're here tonight. So this project conducted its own in-depth outreach. The project team, including consultants and community-based organizations such as Verde, conducted outreach with stakeholder working group in multiple languages, targeted outreach with the Metzger community, and did broader engagement across 2 years. Engagement helped staff and council identify community needs and policies and priorities as policies were set. The code before you tonight reflects those policies that were adopted. There's really nothing new to see here, just codifying what's already been adopted by council. Next slide, please. The policies set through the MADE and Washington Square projects have finally culminated in a code package that translates these policies into specific regulations. One of the primary guiding principles, like I mentioned earlier, was simplify. Simplify the code so it's easier to interpret and implement. The first way we did that, consolidating zones. So if you look at this crazy list of zones, that's what we got today. It's 16 zones of commercial, industrial, and mixed use. We even have 2 MUR and 3 MUE zones. It's just too much. So we had to simplify. Next slide, please. So our new framework relies on just 5 primary zones. So 1 commercial, 1 industrial, and 3 mixed use zones with varying priorities. So first, we have our commercial zone, which functions very similarly to our existing CG zone. If you picture development along 99, this is very similar to that, but picture some more pedestrian friendliness in residential. And we have our 1 industrial zone, which is intended to protect job-dense industries and manufacturing. Next slide, please. And then we have our 3 primary mixed-use zones. So each of these has a different focus. First, we have the mixed-use commercial, which is our broadest mixed-use zone. It allows all sorts of activity, including standalone commercial and standalone residential. Then we have mixed-use employment, where the priority is on employment. So you can only build residential if it's part of a vertical mixed-use development that includes at least 30% of the square footage as an employment use. And then we have our MUR, mixed-use residential, which is like MUE but flipped. So you can only do commercial activity if there's residential. Next slide, please. So this is our new proposed zoning map and shows you where each of these zones is proposed to be located. So you'll see 7 instead of 5 zones, but that's just because we have our MUCBD for downtown and TMU for Triangle. So those are kind of separate. And once again, the COM is mostly along 99. MUE is mostly in those areas that are designated as industrial on the comp plan, but weren't suitable for industrial redevelopment. Industrial is where we do see potential for redevelopment, or you can see the Durham wastewater treatment plant is also industrial, understandably so. And then we have mixed-use commercial and mixed-use residential primarily in Washington Square and River Terrace. Next slide, please. And then in Washington Square Regional Center Plan District, we also utilized sub-districts to give us a little bit more of a refined focus. So we have 3 sub-districts that are design review, which is primarily the mall and a couple of surrounding properties, the apartment sub-district along Oak Street, which requires higher density when building residential development, and then we have the Metzger business sub-district along Hall, which is imagined as a more neighborhood-scaled mixed-use zone. So it's scaled down when compared to other MUC zones. Next slide, please. Overall, our proposed changes will allow for more housing, more mixed-use development, fewer vehicle trips, fewer needs for land use reviews such as modifications, more services within walking distance of residences and employees, more places for businesses to start, easier code to interpret, more urban development, particularly in the Washington Square, more job density in industrial zones, more mixed-use development citywide, and it opens the door for innovation and a lack of market predictability while protecting existing businesses. Doing lots of lists tonight because I'm very proud of all the many things this code does. Next slide, please. But where our code is becoming more restrictive in the city, we are also allowing paths forward for getting more flexibility. We've added a new adjustment process that will be applicable to most places in the city. And this process allows applicants to exceed square footage limits that are placed in certain zones in exchange for providing a public benefit that aligns with one of the 3 legs of the MATE stool. And then specifically in the design review subdistrict in Washington Square Regional Center, we've introduced the new Development Design Review, or DDR, application. So this application is designed specifically to facilitate innovative development using primarily discretionary approval criteria rather than relying on static development standards. The use of these criteria allows us to promote more mixed-use urban development in and around the mall site, where there are fewer public streets and where we anticipate innovative development that is just really difficult to anticipate with really specific and rigid development standards. Next slide, please. So these are some of the changes we've made since the Planning Commission. We made a few changes to like some Scrivener errors stuff based on Commission President Jackson's suggestions. We've also adjusted the minimum heights in the Metzger Business Subdistrict in Washington Square. This was just accidentally noted as a minimum 3 stories height. In the previous version, it was always intended to be a minimum 2 stories. That was just an error. And then, we've also made some changes in response to outstanding comments from Macerich, one of the major property owners. Their comments were primarily regarding 1, a 30,000 square foot limit and adjustments, and 2, allowance of drive-throughs. So really quick, in response to the 30,000 square foot limit and adjustments, it's always been staff's intention to allow for the modification of that limit through the DDR process rather than requiring like a separate adjustment application or any sort of additional intensive review. We always just intended for them to be able to request that flexibility with the DDR as long as they were showing that it was part of a cohesive pedestrian-friendly development. But since the Planning Commission hearing, we've worked with the legal counsel for the city and for Macerich to refine the language to make sure that that intent is a lot clearer. Macerich also advocated for removing the 30,000 square foot limit altogether, but we continue to believe that the limit is important. It's not an outright prohibition that we've placed in the code, it's just a limit that can be adjusted. And the intent of the code is that as long as a development is proposed as pedestrian friendly, that limit, staff will always allow that limit to be exceeded as long as the development meets the overall goals. The existence of that limit just gives us one more lever to ensure that we're getting that kind of development. And next, about the drive-throughs, we continue to propose prohibiting drive-throughs in this area for a number of policy reasons. One is that the area is designated as both a regional center and a climate-friendly area, as we discussed earlier. So in those areas, auto-dependent uses are discouraged both at the regional and the state level. And another reason is that the policies we adopted for Washington Square in 2021 also see this area as a pedestrian-friendly area where auto-dependent uses are discouraged. And that was that policy that was adopted in 2021. And then it's also important to note that we've received a lot of community feedback from residents, both through the Washington Square Regional Center project and through different transportation and apartment projects over the past few years that say this area really needs a lot of help becoming a more pedestrian-friendly area, especially for residents living in the area. Cars are already a major barrier for them to get around, so staff believes that allowing drive-throughs would move against these established policies and resident priorities. Next slide, please. As evidenced by the public testimony in support of this project at the Planning Commission and the unanimous Planning Commission recommendation for approval, we believe we've reached the ideal solution for the proposed code. So Planning Commission recommends that the council adopts the proposed amendments. This concludes staff's presentation. We're here to answer any questions. Thank you.
We received one written comment, and it was from Wendy Killington, who is representing Bridgeport Land, the owners of Bridgeport. They indicated that they appreciated the planning staff, and they were initially very concerned, but that the staff listened to the concerned citizens and adjusted to making the proposal better for everyone. We also have 3 people to signed up to testify in person. Dana, come on up. I will not butcher your name a second time. If you'll just turn on the microphone so it's green. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Dana Kraftcheck. You're very close. It's a difficult last name. It's Kraft if you're making dinner reservations. My address is 760 Southwest 9th, Suite 3000, Portland, Oregon 97205. I'm with the law firm of Stoll Reeves here on behalf of PAC Trust. Spoiler alert, we support this and we encourage you to adopt it this evening. In fact, we have a project that we're eager to get permits in that would benefit from this code. So we're very supportive of it. I'd also like to thank Hope and Lloyd and Tom, if he's listening in retirement, for their collaboration and support. Much like the testimony that you summarized, at first we had serious reservations about this text amendment, but now we're very supportive. Just to take a quick step back about PAC Trust, for over 50 years, they've been developing industrial, warehouse, and retail buildings in Tigard. Currently, our buildings are home to more than 300 different tenants. Those are local businesses in Tigard. That's 2.5 million square feet of buildings, mainly located along I-5 between Bridgeport and Bonita. We like to call it the Bonita to Bridgeport area. We estimate that our tenants employ approximately 3,750 people. That's an employment density of about 24 employees per acre. That's what you're trying to achieve with Tiger Made, and we're already there with a lot of PAC Trust's development. PAC Trust is headquartered in Tigard and really sees Tigard as a partner in its success. I mentioned already the almost 2 years of collaboration, and we think of that as not only looking backwards in terms of how well we worked with staff, but looking forward also. Anytime you adopt a code package like this, there are going to be unintended consequences. There are going to be things that need clarification, things that need predictability, and staff has committed to us that we will continue to work together and amend the code in the future for these revisions if needed. PAC Trust is here if you've got any questions. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Next individual, Steve Pfeiffer. Welcome, Steve.
Good evening, Mayor Lube, members of the commission, members of the council. My name is Steve Pfeiffer, address 1120 Northwest Cooch, Portland, Oregon 97204. I'm a land use attorney here tonight on behalf of Macerich, and I believe there's a sign up behind me with Jacob Knudsen, who's a senior vice president at Macerich and will follow me after I'm done here. And Hope kind of set the stage for the one reason we're here tonight. We worked with staff through a series of clarifications that we wanted to see and obtained, and some word changes, as Hope mentioned, that solved some ambiguities that we just, again, needed clarification on. The reason we're here tonight is that we are strongly opposed to the one provision in the code, which is the 3,000 square foot cap on retail tenants, new retail tenants at Washington Square. Washington Square carries the MUC zone, the new zone, on the 67 acres of its site. It's also wholly within the design review subdistrict. The design review subdistrict has 13 very broadly stated criteria that address a wide range of concerns that the staff might have in a type 2 review and approval of any development of Washington Square, from pedestrian accommodations to open space to building orientation to architecture to scale to massing, and every new development project of any kind, remodel, redevelopment, or new construction, will be subject to that design review process. At the same time, there are restrictions in 18670-050-3A. It's a cap, which I'll just read out loud because it's a big pile of paper in front of you. In the MUC zone at Washington Square, and this is the entirety of the site, including any redevelopment within the open parking area today that we might choose to undertake, the maximum gross floor area is 30,000 square feet per tenant for new buildings. If I can have a few seconds here.
Yep.
New tenants are exempt. That is a prohibition. It very much says that that is the maximum square footage. Yes, there's an adjustment process. It is highly discretionary. It can readily be denied. It will take 4 months minimum to go through it. and that affords virtually no certainty to a mall, and I'm sure Jacob will elaborate on this, that relies on anchor tenants. We are precluded from expanding the mall because we're precluded from having an anchor tenant, which is far more than 30,000 square feet, if you know Nordstrom. There's a solution.
Thank you. You've
I have a
gone
letter.
way over your...
Can I submit my handwritten comments, which are
Yeah,
a summary of what I'd
please
like
do.
to say?
Yeah.
I'll put those in the record. Thank you.
Jacob, come on up.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Jacob Knutson with Mace Rich, owner of Washington Square Mall, 11411 North Tatum Boulevard, Phoenix 85028. Washington Square is the largest retail asset not only in the city but in the region. And I want to hit on three things quickly. I thought we had 5 minutes. We only have 2, so I'm trying to shorten this down a little bit. But 1, the competitive disadvantage this puts us in. 2, the positioning within my portfolio. And then 3, simply why this is being proposed. Looking at 2 primary competitors in the region, I went through this today, Clackamas Town Center and Bridgeport Village. Clackamas has 8 tenants over 30,000 square feet. Bridgeport Village has 5. These are just 2 examples of the competition we have to face. If we aren't able to facilitate these tenants on our property, they are going to go elsewhere. Looking within the positioning within my portfolio, we have 45 regional malls in our portfolio. Not one of them has ever seen a municipality put a restriction on it like this. This is the first time I've ever seen something like this happen. And when we go to our company and look at where we're going to put capital as these assets evolve, this puts us at a disadvantage. For me personally, working on Washington Square Mall, my company is not going to be willing to invest money into a property that has a cap where the city, frankly, isn't willing to look at the future of what this asset wants to be. And lastly, that puts me into the third, is just trying to understand where this is coming from. We've asked staff, but we've still been unclear why this cap, frankly, is being imposed on us. This can only lead me to being unsure if the city of Tigard believes in this asset as a long-term regional mall in the city. That's unfortunate. There's 9 million annual visitors that come into the property and over $500 million spent annually at this asset. So I think the city, tourism, and everything that comes into this property would say otherwise. And lastly, I'll just finish with putting limitations on this property doesn't allow us to make the right decisions for the real estate, and I'd really hope that the City Council reconsiders this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wold, are there any phone callers in the queue or anyone wishing to testify by video?
Mayor, no callers in the queue and no requests for video comment.
Okay. Hope, would you like to come on back up and respond to the testimony?
Okay. Thank you. So, yes, there's not much to respond to for Dana. Just thank you, Dana. Very collaborative experience writing code with them. And as for Mr. Pfeiffer's comments, we believe that we've worked with, and Mr. Knudsen, sorry, I consider them a team. We have had several meetings with them as well. We've encouraged having more before this meeting, but they declined to continue to meet. We wholeheartedly believe in the Washington Square Mall and its importance in this city. However, we believe in the 30,000 square foot limit for the reasons I highlighted in my report. But of course, that's a policy decision that you all are welcome to advise us on.
Susan?
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and councilors. Susan Shanks, Senior Planner with the City of Tigard in the Community Development Department. So in terms of the 30,000 square foot limit, I just want to add some additional context that our Macerich friends were not able to add in the time that they had. So just to clarify that, yes, it is true that we have created a sub-district for this area, like primarily the Washington Square Mall area, but it's that whole area that is bounded by 217 Greenberg and Hall, primarily because it's so unique. It doesn't have a regular street grid at all. I mean, it's a very large property, absolutely. when they got their Sears redevelopment plans approved, I don't know if any of you were, I think Commissioner Counselor who was on the Planning Commission at the time, that they had to go through a plan development review process, which was discretionary. A higher level of review required them to go to the Planning Commission, and also cost more money, had uncertainty, all the things that they were talking about, and so, but they needed to do that because it's so difficult to write code that anticipates everything, and then it becomes even more difficult to write code when there is like landforms or street patterns or just development patterns that are very unique. Like we just can't even begin to anticipate, with a 100-acre site, essentially, like what and where, because we don't have a street to say like, oh, street-facing facade shall have, X percentage of windows. It just makes it very, very difficult. And so given what they had to go through in the past just to actually get a regular, and a really great development approved, we actually wanted to make that easier. And so the DDR, the Development Design Review, is kind of a lighter version of the Plan Development Review. I was about to repeat the same thing. It is still discretionary. It doesn't require that they go to Planning Commission, but it gets at the things that they actually produced last time with the Sears redevelopment plan. It gets at those same things that I think they want and that we want, and they recognize, like where we have some mutual ground there. Because we, like I said, otherwise we were stuck with writing very, very lengthy and very specific requirements, because one of the things that we also have to contend with writing code nowadays is our state legislation with regard to housing, and all housing is considered needed housing. And in their redevelopment plan, they were contemplating, and hopefully are still contemplating, putting housing on the site. And when that comes into play, and we want to see more housing there, we want to see more residents, there's tons of jobs, and there is, great economic opportunity. It's a great economic engine, but for it to be a more vibrant place, it needs people. And so we're seeing on Greenberg and elsewhere in the neighborhood more dense development going in. We're not yet seeing that on the Washington Square Mall. There's that one apartment building, but we need more people. And so they were contemplating residences, but as soon as you start thinking about residential uses, you end up having to do everything clear and objective. And that makes it super hard. And so we had to navigate this very difficult path to ensure that we can address kind of the uniqueness of their site, and so that they could too, but also that we met all state requirements for the clear and objective standards. And so it was a really interesting, sorry, I'm just like, I wish I had some water. I'm on allergy meds, so it makes my mouth really dry. But it made for a really difficult code to write, and we really felt like we had to balance all these different competing requirements and needs of the community, of Macerich, of the state, and the requirement for clear and objective standards. That being said, we also, kind of gave them a path forward that is much less intensive than the one that they had to go through for the Sears redevelopment project. And then going back all the way around to the 30,000 square foot limit, it's not a prohibition. It really isn't. We've made it really explicit that it is just as adjustable as it is through the DDR process, similar to the PDR, and that it doesn't actually count towards, like that cap does not count towards the existing mall structures at all, or the existing tenants, or any future tenants that would want to occupy, like let's say if JCPenney's decided not to be JCPenney's anymore, another tenant could occupy that very large footprint, and that would be allowed. And that is specifically written into the code as well. So it doesn't really touch the existing mall. The restriction is not applied to the existing mall, the existing spaces, or their tenants or future tenants of those spaces. Sorry, my mouth is just so dry. The allergy meds just dry me out, sorry. it really is about the new development. It's about going forward. And what we have seen from what their design folks came up with for the Sears redevelopment area is exactly, I mean, we fully support that. And we wanted to give them a better, easier path forward with that kind of development. And so that's what we were trying to achieve, is balancing all those different requirements, competing interests, again, from the state to the community to the city's goals and objectives, and recognizing the unique nature of the site and how difficult it is to anticipate everything and write code, for everything, especially a site as large as that, and really wanting to hopefully make it easier for them to bring back development projects like the one that they came in with a couple of years ago that we're still hoping that they go forward with. But we know that they're dealing with a changing market, and I mean, it's hard. We're trying to provide enough flexibility, a lot of flexibility, and as much certainty as we can, given all those factors that I just went through. So I know that's like kind of a big story, but those are all the things that we're trying to juggle here. And as Hope said, it is a policy decision. It is not, there's no state or other regional policy that would prevent you from saying something different. And we're prepared to basically take your direction on this.
Thank you. I will open up to council questions, and friendly reminder, questions, not consideration. Yeah, Councilor Shaw.
Thank you very much. So question, if it, with regards to 30,000 square feet, if it's not Sears, or what was Sears was not JCPenney's, can they build another space that's 30,000 square feet or more? Let's say if Langer Farms or something else wanted to come in, are they able to do that?
Go ahead.
I was gonna. Oh. No, but yes. Yes and no. So yes, I will say. I will start by saying yes. So okay, if they wanted to build a whole new, like something that's over 30,000 square foot, whether that's an addition or a standalone building, that would likely trigger a DDR review because of the level of development. It wouldn't be like a minor modification to the site. So once they're in the DDR, they could, yes, the 30,000 square foot limit is something we look at, but we're really just looking at it for, is it pedestrian friendly what they're proposing? So one thing to note too is that when they're coming in for a DDR, they'll have to go through a pre-application, and from the moment they come into the pre-application, we'll look at their site plan and be able to tell if it's a pedestrian-friendly development or not. Whether even, let's say they wanted to propose a 60,000 square foot addition, they would come in for their pre-app, and we would take a look at it and say, oh yeah, it's over 30,000 square feet, but it's definitely still pedestrian-friendly, so we can reasonably say that this is going to be fine, continue going through the DDR process.
Sorry, if I can add one more clarification, that the 30,000 square foot limit is specific to the tenant. It's not to the building. So they, like a giant building with tons of square footage could be built as long as no one tenant had like a 30,000 square foot space. So it doesn't prevent the building of larger buildings. It's about the individual tenant.
Mm-hmm. And one follow-up question, Mayor. Discretionary by its nature is discretionary, not a list of criteria, but is there a framework around what is discretionary?
Yeah, thank you. So we start with the Washington Square Plan District set of regulations. So if you look in the Plan District chapter, we have the site design regulations, the building design, the land use, all of those regulations. Now, if you go through the DDR process, we do have, I think, like 10 different approval criteria that supersede the site design and building design. So they are exempt from those if they go through the DDR and are only subject to the approval criteria. But we would be looking to those development standards as like kind of a guideline or a litmus test, but they're really subject to the approval criteria alone. Does that answer your question?
No further questions, Mayor.
Council President Hu?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your explanation. Can you help me understand where that 30,000 square feet number come from, and why is it just restricted to tenants and not building?
Absolutely.
How would that help make it more pedestrian friendly?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. So the 30,000 square foot limit is something that applies throughout the MUC zone. So not just in the design review subdistrict, but in anywhere zoned MUC, both within the plan district and outside of the plan district. And it's also, we have a similar restriction on indoor sales and services in the MUE zone outside of the plan district and within the plan district. So that 30,000 square foot per tenant, the 30,000 square foot number comes from the small end of a big box store. So we looked at a number of big box stores that exist in the city, and then the smaller ones are maybe around 25,000. So we even gave an extra 5,000 just to like allow for a reasonable sized thing. So that's where the 30,000 square foot limit came from. And we also had a consultant on the Washington Square Regional Center project that advised the 30,000 square foot limit. And it's per tenant rather than per building because many of our development standards outside of discretionary criteria, our development standards often require like an outdoor entrance per tenant. So if you imagine even like in Southeast Portland on Division Street, I'm imagining you have like a very big building that's probably much bigger than 30,000 square feet. But you have lots of entrances into different tenants, different stores, and it's still a very pedestrian friendly environment. So that's where that came from.
Councillor Shaw?
Thank you so much. And the review that consultant or either staff had done, was there a comparison to other malls such as Clackamas, or I think it was also referred to Bridgeport, and the other 45 regional malls, I think was the number that was provided. Was there consideration given to this being the first time that there is a limit? And if so, what is the consideration for still moving forward to the 30,000?
So Echo Northwest was the firm that we used that did a fair amount of market analysis as well as development analysis in terms of what was feasible, what was possible, and then what we were seeing even regionally and also nationally with regard to malls and redevelopment. So it came from it came from their professional knowledge about such things because they are a firm that really focuses in on the economics of development, specifically within the public sector. I mean, in terms of helping the public sector handle and manage these issues. And so I can't remember specifically if they looked at Clackamas or Bridgeport, if those were considered even like kind of comparable specifically because there's what I've learned is that there are different classes of malls, and the Macerich folks could go into greater detail about that. So I couldn't say that they specifically looked really locally, but there are many malls to look at across the country, and so they brought their expertise in with regard to that, as well as much of the local market conditions, that can be understood as you get kind of a smaller and smaller scale. So there was a lot of analysis done, and that was still the recommendation in order to, and we thought in keeping with where the mall was actually going. That's where it came from.
And I do think it's important to come back to something Susan mentioned in her response to the public testimony, that it's not a limit on existing or new tenants within the mall space. It's only looking at redevelopment. So another thing that the 30,000 square foot limit and the DDR process is modeled very similarly after our direct experience with Macerich and this exact mall site going through the PDR process previously for the Sears redevelopment. So at that time, there wasn't a 30,000 square foot limit, but there was a limit on all development had to be a minimum of 2 stories. And so we, as part of that PDR process, we did allow a single story theater. So they got flexibility through the PDR to get that single story theater because overall the development was in line with that pedestrian friendly thing that we were looking for. And so the DDR is intended to be very, very similar in regards to its relationship with the 30,000 square foot limit as the PDR was to the theater. So we had direct experience with this site and this property owner too.
And I would also add that, thank you, Hope, that we're we're trying to modernize the code and to be as like kind of on point with regard to the market and also the goals and objectives of the city, and what we've seen with redevelopment in other malls and what they have shown us with what could happen with the Sears redevelopment, in that we're focusing on what we're proposing, but you just actually brought up something that is worth mentioning that we're taking away, which is FAR, which is floor area ratio. So in addition to having a 2-story minimum requirement formerly in the Washington Square area, we had a floor area ratio requirement that also was not working in the mall area, and that's often a thing that became a barrier for small redevelopment, reuse of even existing buildings that were single story. And another reason why they had to go through the PDR process before was because of the FAR requirement in combination with the single story requirement. So we've traded both of those. We recognize that those were limitations that weren't working for this one based on, again, market analysis and also the goals and objectives of the cities in terms of this being a very walkable area.
And I just want to clarify one more time to make sure we're extremely clear that the 30,000 square foot limit does not apply to anybody inside of the mall. So if JCPenney, they want to re-tenant that space, this does not impact that ability at all.
So my question is, where did, hearing from Jacob that none of their malls have any sort of limit like this, where did the limit sort of come from the consultant? I know you referenced that like Tigard has some box stores that are like 25,000, but I'm wondering where the idea for it and where the number came from in general, and if they've seen any sort of restriction like this across the country and what it has provided.
I'm not sure. Susan might be able to speak to the consultant a little bit more on what they came from the 30,000 square foot number, but I think it's important to note that with this 30,000 square foot cap, we're not looking at malls. We're not looking at even the mall. We're looking at redevelopment on property owned by the mall. So we're looking at like the 30,000 square foot limit is applicable to all areas that we've designated throughout the city as redevelopable in some pedestrian friendly way. And so that's where the 30,000 square foot limit, yeah.
Yeah, I think just listening, I feel like to their testimony also, the concern seems to be understanding that it's a cap if, unless you go through this other process, and feeling maybe the 12 development criteria, or I'm apologizing if I'm using the incorrect term, just to help me understand, maybe it's too squishy and there's too much left to discretion. And I'm wondering what the protections might be for, the city teammates now, perhaps say, yes, it's a great idea, but if there's turnover or a different mindset, and just the stability of knowing the expectations, what are the protections around that?
Yeah, so because we agreed with Macerich after Planning Commission that maybe the language wasn't as extremely clear as it could be, just in case of staff turnover and misinterpretations. We've added it in several ways. So one way is, and I can bring up the exact code reference, but it's right above the land use table. It lists out what the meaning of a restricted use is. And it says right there, a restricted use is something that can be adjusted through the adjustment process, the PDR process, or the DDR process. So it specifically states that. And then in the DDR itself, we added a new approval criteria that's specifically addressing use restrictions and says if you're proposing to exceed a use restriction or asking for flexibility in a use restriction, then you have to meet this approval criteria that just shows that your development will still be in line with pedestrian scale, et cetera.
And have you been able to speak with them about those specific changes? And
Yes.
I'm looking at Macerich, you're aware of the clarification?
They don't go to our issue.
Okay.
We were told that the language that we wrote is addressing the issue, at least in terms of making it very clear that it can be adjusted through the DDR process.
Okay. Additional questions? Council President Hu?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, my first question is, can you just give a very high-level overview comparing the DDR and the PDR process? And since this DDR is supposed to be an expedited method, right? So can you just do I went through the PDR as a planning commissioner, but
Yeah,
go.
absolutely. So let me start by saying that I don't think the DDR is the issue. Even with Mesa Ridge, they have expressed great support for the DDR process. So the PDR too, it is designed more with subdivisions in mind and like in an undeveloped scenario and looking at subdivision. So it's very tricky to fit that into an urban redevelopment environment. And yes, we did it with Sears, but it was more laborious than it needed to be. And maybe a stretch to try to tie some of those approval criteria to this specific situation. And in addition to that, they had to go to a hearing for that. Now the DDR is only a type 2 level review, so it doesn't go to a hearing, and the approval criteria are aimed very clearly at urban neighborhood scale redevelopment, and we built it specifically with the Sears development in mind. When we wrote these approval criteria, we wrote, what do we like about the Sears development? What does everybody like about the Sears development? And we put those into approval criteria. And the DDR is also a lower fee, which you'll see in a minute, than the PDR.
And I will add 2 more things to that. The PDR also requires a public benefit in exchange for flexibility. That's not really part of the DDR. It also required applicants to identify every standard that they wanted flexibility on and basically say, okay, so the setbacks in this zone are 20 feet for rear yard setbacks. We want 18 feet. And so they'd have to write that as one standard. And then they'd say like the window requirement or the driveway requirement, because it's all, the PDR was more in response to, here's a whole list of standards that come with zones that we have to meet, and we need some flexibility. And so the PDR gives flexibility, but you have to specifically go through that process of identifying. It has to be like kind of managed and maintained, because those developments then continue to exist, and we always have to go back with like, what was the number that they got, because it's not the standard. So with the DDR, don't have to go through that process of identifying, because we're basically saying you're exempt from the standards. And so you're just going through the process without the need to like provide that public benefit specifically in exchange for flexibility. We're just providing the flexibility. So that's the other way that they're different.
Thank you. And another question, it just dawned on me when you explained why this is per tenant and not per building. It seems like if it's bigger than 30,000 per tenant, all they have to do is just add more doors to the tenants. It sounds like it could be considered pedestrian friendly if they just add more door going to the tenant. I don't know if that's too simple or.
I think there's always a trade-off. I mean, there's so many ways to slice and dice this, and that could be a fine example, but more doors where? And again, going back to this being such a unique area, one of the reasons why we went down this path too is that I think there's a few public streets in that area, but most of the what people drive on through that whole area are actually not public streets. And so often we talk about we want required entrances to face the street, and we don't have that here. So, you know, it's like, where do the doors go? That would make the most sense. And that's, again, why it's really difficult to provide both certainty and flexibility in a situation like this. So we went with kind of full-on flexibility. You can choose to go even more flexible and take away the 30,000 square feet. That's totally your policy choice. But it's just because of the nature of this particular area with lacking a public street infrastructure that, you know, we are originally, like when the Sears redevelopment project came through, we were like, public streets, and we're like, it was not something that we could exact from the mall. The code didn't allow us to do that. But we worked out a really good like middle ground of actually putting those streets into tracks to make them really clearly separate from the developable area, because again, it also made hard to apply standards and whatnot. So ultimately we came to kind of agreement about that, but it makes applying standards really hard when you just have this giant site with like very few organizing principles that the city normally uses to regulate development, like number of doors and where. It seems simple, but it's actually hard.
Okay.
Just one more question. I think this might be for our city attorney. Have you seen the testimony, written one, provided by Perkins Coie by Mr. Fife?
Yes, Mr. Pfeiffer and I talked extensively yesterday, and yes, I am aware of those. I'm aware of his challenges.
Do you want to respond, or is
So I'm not able to respond to those right now.
Okay.
I am aware that Macerich feels strongly about this, and that he is preserving his right to appeal.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any additional questions coming to mind? Yeah, Council President Hu, you're on a roll.
This is not about the 30,000 square feet, because I thought we should move on to. So in the news code, residential use in industrial zone is totally removed, because in the old code, residential zone use was allowed in limited cases in industrial zone, and the explanation was that it's rarely used, so we remove it. But so in other words, but it is being used, right? So can you give me an example of when residential use was applicable in industrial zone currently?
I can't give you an example of an existing one where it actually exists. I think the only provision that we previously had was that it could be a single detached house if it was occupied by a caretaker. And we just never really see that happening, and I couldn't name a specific example of it happening. If one does exist out there, it'll be non-conforming and they'll be continued to be allowed in that case, but I couldn't tell you a single one that it actually exists in, so we didn't think we should be writing code to allow something we don't even think exists currently.
Well, but during your presentation, you said one of the purposes of this code is to encourage more residential development. Absolutely. And I'm concerned about, again, talking about unintended consequences. If it's rarely used, so why do we have to remove it? We just let it continue to be conditional use, or?
Yeah. Thank you. So thank you. That gets back to like one of the guiding principles of how we established what an industrial zone is and where it should be. So right now we have a lot of it land that's technically zoned industrial, but it's not functioning like industrial land, like our industrial park zone. So the way that we've approached zoning with this new project is to reduce the amount of land that's zoned industrial, but really restrict the types of uses that are allowed there to make sure that those lands that are zoned just industrial are just for manufacturing and job dense uses, and we're really protecting that land and the value of that land for industrial activities. And when we allow residential, it tends to increase the value. I don't think in this case the single detached house with the caretaker is increasing the value. It's just about getting specific about what the intention of the code is. And we are allowing residential everywhere else in the city and every other zone. So that's kind of the trade-off.
Okay, and one last question, and this might seem a little weird first when I ask. So I noticed that you changed the definition of adult bookstore from an establishment having at least 50% of merchandise, blah, 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 to an establishment characterized by blah, blah, blah. And since adult bookstore is part of the example for adult entertainment use, which is prohibited in a lot of places, which I have no problem with, but I'm just concerned a little bit by, from having a 50% merchandise that's, depicting the specified sexual activity or specified anonymous area defined in the section to characterize. So it seems like, if you just sell a little bit of that, then it is adult bookstore, and therefore you could be excluded from a whole lot of area. And my concern is about the word sexual activities, because a lot of groups have been using that to attack, LGBTQ people. So I'm just concerned that this redefined definition could be used to exclude organizations that want to, have LGBTQ positive activities or gender study activities from certain areas, including schools. So I just want to make sure that I confirm with you that sexual orientation and gender identity is not same as sexual activities in our code. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Seeing no additional questions, I will close the public hearing and open it up for council consideration of ordinance 24-05. Yeah, Councilor Wolf. Oh, sorry, Councilor Shaw.
Not a problem. Thank you very much. Really appreciate the presentation. Some of the concerns I have is the word concerns that have been used on laborious, and obviously you've done quite a bit of work. Have been to a number, and thank you for presenting a number of times to both Planning Commission and Council. If there is time for staff and Macerich to go back and see if there is additional common ground, does that slow this process down? And if so, what is slowed down? Because I am concerned just that one of our biggest retail centers is not supportive of this.
Yes, it would slow down the project. We are prepared to take a huddle as a team tonight if this is something that you guys want to pursue even tonight, so that we can have an answer tonight on some kind of resolution for the 30,000 square foot. We'd prefer to take a huddle rather than to continue the item, but.
Yeah, I think to move forward, we probably need to hear from all the counselors and probably sort of flesh out sort of where we all are on that to see if it is needed. Because I think, it's a give and take. And as you talk about, it's a policy decision. And we need to talk about what sort of policy and vision we are looking for future forward. I struggle with it. I understand the concerns and the uncertainty of wanting to be able to do a project and having to invest a lot of money into figuring out whether or not that project can get off the ground based on criteria that may seem kind of squishy to get an exception. On the other hand, we have a strategic vision to make this city more walkable and accessible for everyone. So much like I think the MADE project in general is balancing what is the right balance for that. And so I'm curious for the counselors who, would it be helpful maybe to take like a 5 to 10 minute break for everybody to sort of sit with their thoughts? Because I know a lot of us sort of sit and work through things. Would that be helpful? Yes, no? I'm
intrigued by Hope's offer to do a huddle, and I think it's the right thing for us to do. If trying to get this moving forward this evening, I'm good with that, and I would defer to them to huddle.
Are we thinking 10 minutes, 15 minutes? Let's do 10 minutes. So, okay. We will take a recess for 10 minutes and meet back here at 8:20 or 8:32. All right, I will reconvene this meeting. And to refresh everybody, we are talking about the Tigard Maid project, and we are under council consideration. Hope?
Thank you. Okay, so I think I would like to re-enter by first understanding exactly what each of the counselors is most concerned with or uncomfortable with the 30,000 square foot cap and the DDR process, or what exactly the level of concern is. I think what I've heard is that we really want to continue to just advance the policies and the priorities that we've set with our strategic vision in the Washington Square. I am going to read a couple of things because Susan was lovely enough to provide me with the adopted policies from Washington Square and had highlighted a couple things. So allowing a complementary mix of land uses that are appropriate in a walkable environment, prioritize high-intensity transit supportive development on both sides of Greenberg Road, and regulate the design and location of streets, buildings, parking areas, and other site improvements to support a walkable urban environment. So I think that that's what I've heard from you guys, is that that's what we still want to prioritize. And I'm going to pause and just, I think I would like to, if possible, hear from each of the counselors on what exactly the level of discomfort is, or what the area of discomfort is.
Anyway, yeah, Councilor Wolf.
So, fun fact, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, Nordstrom is 90,000 square feet, 30, 30, 30. The home store out in the parking lot is 30. So it just gave me a really helpful visual, like the Macy's furniture store that's out in the back. That's what I'm assuming that you guys were talking about. So I think from a vision perspective of what we want, my issue probably is not with the 30,000 cap, but it is with maybe the DDR process or the unknowns. So I think in chatting with them, that conversation of personalities or people might be on the same page, but if there isn't that clarity in language or how you, I don't know if expedite's the right word, but I don't want to see this, be long or be really very vague, because I don't know. I always feel like Lloyd Center is always kind of a risk model of bigger buildings that then set vacant. And we've seen them around us often, that then you don't see future tenants. So that helps, Hope. But I just want companies to feel that there are options to move forward, and that it's not going to get slowed down, or that we say that sure we'll support that, but then there's really not a path forward. So that's where I am. Thank you.
Council President Hu?
Thank you, Mayor. So there are a lot of things I like about Tigard Maid, obviously. One is streamline the code and make it simplify, which is great. And we also modern the code, right? Because it includes mobility hub for EV charging stations, service provider, and eco roof, and get rid of self-service storage, and for the most part, and increase residential use. So those things really align with our priority, and I support those because I can see a nexus between those efforts and our priority. My difficulty is I could not see the nexus between the 30,000 cap and our priority. So maybe I'm just not smart enough to see the connection, but I just don't see the connection there right now. So that's my problem. So thank you.
Councilor Shaw?
Great, thank you. And following Council President, who I'm appreciative goes from 16 zones to 5, I think you've worked incredibly hard to simplify what could be a very onerous code, and you and the staff have done just a fantastic job. I am concerned by the cap. I'm concerned by the DDR process. I do think that the City of Tigard wants to promote economic development. I think that we can do that without necessarily a cap. And I am concerned that it would limit our economic competitiveness as a region. And I think a lot of people see Washington Square as a treasure to go to and spend quite a bit of money there, which we enjoy. It helps us as a city. So for that reasons, I'm not supportive of the cap currently, and I am concerned about the DDR process.
Councillor Singh?
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the presentation. I'm in support of this ordinance the way it is in the cap. You know, my understanding is that this current ordinance provides, you know, more regulation to support walkability, and, you know, to me this is more than about, you know, economic development and profit. I think it's also about public health, you know, walkability, and also climate. You know, some of these you know, big box stores, strip malls are typically, you know, urban heat islands, and it's just not. I don't see it as the future. You know, there's a book written by Ellen Dunham Jones called Retrofitting Suburbia, and she talks about essentially, you know, patterns of these suburban, you know, malls sort of going defunct, and it's happening throughout the nation. And I think, you know, we need to start looking forward and, you know, really pushing industries and you know, land developers to really start thinking strategically around the issues of climate and walkability. And I think that doesn't go against, you know, economic development and you know, profit, but I think I support this generally because of those factors as well. So.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate the conversations around this, and I think perhaps not the rest of Tigard Made probably isn't getting enough airtime versus this one specific 30,000 square foot topic. And so I appreciate all of the work that you know, the Tigard teammates have done, and working with our businesses and ownership. It's been quite the journey, and I really also appreciated like the field trips we took and understanding physically what it looks like and what the goals are and what the employment density looks like and what those kinds of jobs are. And I think Tigard Made does a really great job of balancing both. If you're here, we don't want to kick you out, you are not unwelcome, but we understand that future forward, we have to focus on businesses that are more job dense to be able to support the shortage, the incredible shortage that we have for our land. And I think that council looking forward thinks about that as we look to perhaps expand way down the road and those sorts of things west. But that being said, my kind of much like Councillor Wolf, my objection isn't the 30,000 square feet, because I think it does speak to looking forward that Tigard as a city doesn't want to, by default or without restriction, like have a bunch of box stores around. I don't think that is the future. We see a lot of redevelopment happening in box stores that aren't successful. You know, Washington Square is incredibly successful. It is a very popular mall, and we're excited to have it here. But thinking about the existing structure isn't being prohibited from changing tenants or doing things inside. It's looking future forward and saying, if there is redevelopment, and it's not just there, it is anywhere that is applicable. So it's not just picking on Washington Square, that if you want something over 30,000 square feet, there should be a discussion of what that looks like. I don't think that is an unfair ask. I think what perhaps needs to be worked on is more specific and perhaps clearer of what is it okay to get there, and maybe that's just me not understanding and listening to the concerns. But in business, I understand the risk versus reward. You're not going to sink a ton of money into a project if you're not confident that you're meeting that criteria, and understanding that you may not necessarily be able to meet with the city planner until you have an idea and have it more fleshed out rather than, you know, hypotheticals. So that's where my concern is, that it's not a flat no, but not necessarily the most clear path of how to get to yes. Because I agree, people in this room are probably like, yeah, we probably all agree, but the importance of the code is to make sure that future forward, unless the council decides on another code change, that the same expectations today happen if the people in this room change. So that's a long-winded way to give my explanation. I hope, do you feel like you got a good sense?
Good evening, everybody. Kenny Asher, Community Development Director. Thank you so much for such a thoughtful discussion, deliberation. Here's why I think we are. I've heard mixed opinions about the 30,000-foot cap. All we're trying to do there is to prohibit big box stores from being built on that site, and have also heard some concerns about the DDR process. The first is easier to solve tonight than the second. If the council wanted to remove the cap, we were actually prepared to probably proffer something tonight that could get you there. But the second, a whole new process for allowing development to happen in that district, would be not solvable tonight, and honestly would send us back to some really basic drawing boards. So we would ask for a continuance, and we would have to go back and put our heads together on how we would do that. That would be a very different kind of approach than what we've come to through all of the 4-year process that we've been working on. So I just want to separate those two paths and see if the council can also separate those and let us know where the council stands on each. Okay.
I do also just want to clarify that changing the DDR process would be very difficult because, so I also want to point out, Mr. Pfeiffer expressed great support for the DDR process at the Planning Commission hearing, so I don't think that the DDR process is the issue. It is that getting that certainty on the 30,000 square foot issue, and that is an easier problem to solve even tonight. The reason why we came up with the DDR2, I want to remind everyone, is just the difficulty of the Washington Square Regional Center site and the mall site. Writing particular standards, we can get there, but it's going to take us time and will probably be something that the mall really doesn't like, because that's the trade-off between flexibility and certainty. Is we can provide certainty, but it's going to be more difficult for everyone.
And prescriptive.
Yes, yes.
Councillor Wolf.
So I appreciate and respect the expertise and the time and the investment that you guys have done to get us where we are. It was really helpful for me to visualize what is 30,000 square feet. So that probably gives me a little bit of pause around Washington Square, because I don't want big box stores either. We have limited opportunity and space, but I guess I would shift a little bit, and I don't want to, let's negotiate square footage. I don't want to just remove the cap. That makes me very nervous, and it steps away from the goals. But having a perspective of size gave me some interest, but I don't know what the rest of the council, and I don't know what the right number is, but I don't want huge stores included. So I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Does anyone else? Yeah, Councillor Shaw?
Thank you, Councilor Wolf. I appreciate that. And I'm wondering if we removed the cap and we keep the DDR process the same, that gives you the flexibility to have that discussion if it should be 20,000 or 25, or maybe it's 35, but that gives you the flexibility. So that's what my recommendation would be.
But if you remove the cap, it doesn't force them into that process where the cap forces them into it, or?
They're probably already in the process if they're looking at that 30,000 square feet.
Okay.
Significant redevelopment in this area, unless it's just standalone residential, which has to have a clear and objective path. Everything else will go through a DDR process in this area. And we are confident relatively, that the rest of these criteria do get to what we want to regulate. The 30,000 square foot is really just an extra like safety valve, similar to how Macerich is concerned that with different staff here, we might interpret it differently. We're concerned that without the 30,000 square foot cap, they'll interpret things differently or find a new way around. But we have written these approval criteria to be pretty specific in terms of what we're looking for in terms of scale, which is that it's meant to be pedestrian oriented. And so yes, I'll stop there.
Councillor Singh?
Yeah, I stand by what I said before. I'm definitely in support of just providing more rigorous regulation. So, to support walkability and all these other indicators. So, yeah, I would support the 30,000. Or yeah.
Council President Hu?
Went back to my original question of if the cap is only on tenant and not a building, I don't know how it's supposed to really stop big box buildings, period. So so if we want to remove that 30,000 cap, do we just make the motion to direct staff to remove it, or do we have to cite specific provision?
Well, we came prepared with some alternate language to remove it. That would be easy if that's what the council wanted. We could do that tonight.
I like Councillor Shaw, I will support removing the 30,000 cap.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to the, I'm not opposed to it. I understand that it is an additional safety net. And so I guess I'm wondering, what is the concern if removing it, you feel confident you're still going to get to the same place? Are you still confident you're going to get to the same place? Or is it like, I'm trying to understand, because this has become a huge sticking point.
Yeah. We're a little less confident, is my response. We think that this is the best way to ensure that we're going to get the development patterns that our policies call for. We also want to work with Macerich, and we want to please the council, so we're prepared to follow your direction. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to see a bunch of big box stores spring up, was Hope's point. There are other ways for us to regulate development here, but we think the best way would be to adopt the code as drafted.
It feels like such a big decision that I feel like we're pressured to make, and I wonder does council feel like a continuance, even just to think about it and to work through it?
Shelby.
Oh, yeah. City Attorney Rahal, thank you.
Thank you, Council. So staff has prepared language, and I might suggest proposing that, putting it forward. It seems like Council's talking a lot of hypotheticals now. It might be easier to kind of see what one of the ideas is, just a suggestion.
Mayor, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Oh, I'll hold my question.
And similarly, so we presented some language to you just now. So you'll have a strike-through version at the top and the clean version at the bottom. You'll see here that it continues to exempt tenants within existing buildings. And then the proposed language would also exempt development reviewed through a DDR. So anyone subject to all of the approval criteria would not be subject to the 30,000 square foot limit. An alternative, if you're not comfortable striking that completely, is to discuss a different square footage limit, and we could literally just strike out 30,000 and put another number in there.
Thank you. Councillor Shaw?
Well, it seems to me we're just playing with numbers. We keep talking about walkability. So is walkability 20,000 square feet? Is it 30,000 square feet? Is it 35,000 square feet? So I think it's just as walkable whether it's a big place or a smaller place. It just depends on how much you're walking. And I don't like calling it a big box because it is a square structure, but there's a lot of other things that go into it. So to me, it's just we're playing with numbers. So I still think I would remove the cap, because I'm now confident through your description of what the DDR process is, that there could be some criteria there that both answers the city council's vision and the city's vision of what a future looks like, but also answers walkability and also that economic development.
Well, just if I could respond to that, Councilor Shaw, it's not necessarily just about the size of the building, it's also the parking that supports the building and therefore the development of the entire site. And these larger single-tenant stores tend to require larger parking fields, that they go together, and so you end up having a lot of space in the urban area that is given over to parking without a lot of pedestrian amenities or interest in that area. So to me, it's not necessarily just about playing with numbers, it's about the development forms.
And as a city, we've also removed minimum parking requirements, and I think there's clear guidance that parking is not something that the city would want to spend and have land available and used for. So I'm confident there could be ways to minimize that, and if we enhance transit, there's many other opportunities to do so. But thank you for your response.
If I could just add, sorry, I don't want to.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
We did review a few just example site plans with Macerich throughout while we were working with them, and I do just want to highlight that there were 3 different versions of a potential proposal, one of which was an attachment to the existing building, one of which was a large box store but still supported by a pedestrian environment, and a third that was a box store surrounded by a sea of parking, and all of those were real options for Macerich, whereas we believe that our approval criteria could get at getting away from those, disallowing the third option, because like you said, we have established policies and the approval criteria are pretty clear that it's supposed to be pedestrian oriented, but we would have to be making that argument discretionarily is the problem. And if that proposal came in, we would just be having to work on that argument with the approval criteria rather than having it set that we also have this 30,000 square foot cap that is kind of a guide for measuring when a box store is coming in. Just wanted to provide a little bit, yeah.
Councillor Singh, are you comfortable with the alternative language?
Yes. Yeah. I support this.
Okay. Councillor Wolf, yes, supportive. Council President Hu, are you supportive of the language change?
Yeah, I guess if they have to go through DDR anyways, it's fine.
I am also supportive. Is there any additional discussion, or would somebody like to make a motion that includes the alternative language for the ordinance? And then if there's discussion, we can talk about it once the motion is made.
Mayor, I move to approve ordinance number 24-05 with the amendment provided by city teammate. Do I need to read it?
No, I think we can include it and we can attach it to the ordinance.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the city recorder please read the number and title of the ordinance?
Ordinance number 24-05, an ordinance amending the Community Development Code Title 18, and the zoning map of the City of Tigard for the purpose of adopting updates related to the Tigard Made and Washington Square Regional Center projects, ZON 2024-00002, DCA 2024-00001.
Thank you. Will the city recorder please conduct a roll call vote?
Council President Hu?
Yes.
Mayor Lube?
Yes.
Councilor Shaw?
Yes.
Councilor Singh?
Yes.
And Councilor Wolf?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ordinance number 24-04 is adopted by unanimous vote of the council. Thank you, everyone. Oh, zero, did I say, oh, it says 05, sorry. The next item on our agenda is a fee schedule amendment and development design review. I will open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to testify by phone, video, or in person, there is a sign-up sheet at the back of the room, or please call in now at 503-966-4101. And Associate Planner Pollard, it's yours.
Thank you all. We have made it to the final hearing of the evening, or at least I think it's the final one for all of us, right? Not just me. So this item I don't have a presentation for. This is just to make changes to the fee schedule, just so that we have a fee that we can apply to the new DDR that we just approved or adopted. So the new fee is set at $11,550 for the development design review. That's right in between the site development review fee and the PDR, the plan development review fee, because the level of complexity of review for this project is right in between those two levels of review. And thank you to Councilor Hu for catching that we were accidentally increasing the fee for downtown development in our initial version, but you guys have the revised version now that just relocates the development review or the downtown development review into a new section, and those fees will not be changing at all. And that's it. We're here for questions. Thank you.
We did not receive any written comments. Mr. Wold, are there any callers in the queue or anyone wishing to testify by video?
Mayor, no callers in the queue, no requests for a video comment.
Deputy City Recorder Raimundo, has anyone signed up?
Not at this time, Mayor.
Okay. Are there any questions regarding the fee schedule? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. And council consideration of resolution 24-10.
Mayor, I move to approve resolution number 24-10.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all of those in favor of resolution 24-10, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Resolution 24-10 passes with unanimous vote of the council. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for your extensive work over the last many, many years on this subject.
Thank you all.
We don't have any non-agenda items or executive session this evening. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I second.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you so much. Good night, Tigard.
Good night, Tigard.